August 17, 1964. 125th Street and Lenox Avenue. 2:14 p.m. 12 NYPD officers surrounded one man outside the Red Rooster. What they called him would have gotten most men beaten, arrested, disappeared. Bumpy Johnson said 6 words. By sunset, those 12 badges were gone, not suspended, not transferred, gone. What happened in the 11 minutes that followed didn't just end careers. It rewrote how power worked in New York City. This is the story of the afternoon Bumpy Johnson made the NYPD blink first. To understand what happened on that corner, you need to understand 1964. Not the 1964 you learned about. The real 1964. July 2nd, 1964. President Johnson signs the Civil Rights Act. Harlem erupts 6 days later, not in celebration, in riots, because a white police lieutenant, Thomas Gilligan, shot 15-year-old James Powell twice. The boy was unarmed. Gilligan's explanation: he looked threatening. The streets burned for 6 days, 3 dead, over 500 injured, 465 arrested. The message from the NYPD: we run this neighborhood. But here's what the newspapers didn't print. Harlem in 1964 wasn't just any neighborhood. It was an empire inside a city. $87 million flowed through its streets annually. That's $850 million in today's money. Numbers, rackets, policy banks, real estate, nightclubs, protection. And standing at the center of it all for 30 years was Ellsworth Raymond Johnson, Bumpy. Let me tell you who he was by August 1964. Born 1905, Charleston, South Carolina. Moved to Harlem at 15 after nearly beating a white man to death for insulting his sister. First arrest, 1921, armed robbery, Rikers Island. Then Sing Sing. Then Alcatraz, where he served 10 years alongside inmates who later said he was the only man Al Capone respected. Released 1963. 60 years old. Most men his age were retiring. Bumpy returned to Harlem and did something extraordinary. He brokered peace. Italian mob families wanted Harlem's narcotics trade. Young black militants wanted revolution. The NYPD wanted complete control. Bumpy created a balance, not through violence, through leverage. He knew every cop on the take, every politician with secrets, every mobster who needed favors. His weapon wasn't a gun, it was information. By summer 1964, Bumpy Johnson was the most powerful black man in New York who didn't hold office, and the NYPD hated him for it. Let me tell you about the 28th Precinct in 1964. Captain Howard Lynch commanded it, Irish Catholic, Brooklyn-born, 23 years on the force. He believed in order, his order. To Lynch, Harlem was occupied territory. His men weren't peacekeepers, they were occupiers. Monthly quotas. 200 arrests minimum. Didn't matter for what. Loitering, disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, their favorite charge because it was impossible to disprove. Black men learned fast. Lower your eyes, yes sir, survive the interaction. But Bumpy Johnson never lowered his eyes, and Lynch took that personally. 3 times in 1963, Lynch tried to bring Bumpy in. Fabricated charges, planted evidence, witness intimidation. 3 times Bumpy walked. Lawyers appeared within the hour. Evidence disappeared. Witnesses recanted. By August 1964, Lynch had a theory. If he couldn't arrest Bumpy, he'd humiliate him, publicly, break the mystique, show Harlem that their king could be made to kneel. He just needed the right moment. August had been brutal, not the heat, though it was 94 degrees most days. The pressure. Let me show you what I mean. August 3, 1964. Small's Paradise nightclub. Bumpy's nephew, Clarence, was celebrating his 21st birthday. 50 people inside. 11:47 p.m. 8 officers entered without warrants. Fire code inspection. They overturned tables, smashed glasses, arrested Clarence for assault on an officer, though witnesses said he never stood up. Bumpy got the call at midnight. Most men would have rushed to the precinct, made demands, made threats. Bumpy made a phone call. At 1:15 a.m., the deputy commissioner himself called the 28th precinct. Clarence was released. No charges filed. No apology. The message was clear. Bumpy's reach went higher than Captain Lynch's, and Lynch felt that. August 9, 1964, 116th Street, 2 patrol officers stopped Bumpy's car. Routine traffic stop. His driver, Tommy Green, had been driving for Bumpy 12 years, never a ticket. The officers found marijuana residue in the ashtray. Tommy didn't smoke. They arrested Tommy, impounded the car. Bumpy arrived at the impound lot 6 hours later, alone. The clerk, a 22-year-old kid named Rodriguez, recognized him, started stammering about procedures and forms in triplicate. Bumpy didn't raise his voice. He said, "I know your mother cleans offices on 42nd Street. I know your sister just started at Hunter College. I know your father drives a taxi, cab number 4782. Do your job right." The car was released in 9 minutes. Rodriguez never spoke about it, but the story spread anyway. That's how Bumpy operated. He didn't need to threaten. The implication was enough. But each victory made Captain Lynch more desperate. August 14, 1964. The final provocation. Lynch called a meeting with his 12 most loyal officers, not the good cops, the brutal ones. Officer Patrick "Pat" Donnelly, 6 complaints of excessive force, all dismissed. Officer Vincent Rossi, rumored to carry a second gun, a throwaway to plant on suspects. Officer James McIntyre, known in Harlem as Knuckles, 3 fingers on his right hand broken so many times they were permanently swollen. 12 men who believed the badge made them untouchable. Lynch's instructions were simple: find Bumpy Johnson, get in his face, make him react. I don't care if it's disorderly conduct or assault, bring me something. But then Lynch added one more thing. The thing that would change everything. Remember, he's not special. He's not different. Treat him like you'd treat any other. He used the word. All 12 officers nodded. They hit the streets looking for Bumpy Johnson. And on August 17th, they found him. August 17th, 1964. Let me walk you through this day from 3 angles. Bumpy's morning, 6:45 a.m. Bumpy woke in his apartment on 141st Street. Breakfast, black coffee, 2 eggs, wheat toast. Same breakfast for 40 years. 7:30 a.m. meeting with his accountant, Morris Klein. Reviewed the week's numbers. Policy banks were up 14%. Real estate rent steady. Klein asked, "The police situation, should we be concerned?" Bumpy's response, "They're frustrated. Frustrated men make mistakes." He was waiting for a mistake. 10:15 a.m. visited Madame Stephanie St. Clair, the Queen of Harlem, his mentor for 3 decades. She was 73, retired, but still sharp. She said, "They're going to come at you publicly. Soon." Bumpy. "Let them." She studied his face. "You've got a plan." He smiled, didn't confirm, didn't deny. Lynch's morning, 8 o'clock a.m. Captain Lynch briefed his 12 officers. Radio silence unless you've got him. No backup unless shots fired. This is about sending a message. Officer Donnelly asked, "What if he lawyers up immediately?" Lynch. "He can't lawyer his way out of being disrespected on his own streets. That's the point." They understood. This wasn't about law, it was about humiliation. Lynch gave them a list of places Bumpy frequented: Red Rooster, Small's Paradise, the Teresa Hotel, corner of 125th and Lenox. Find him where people can see, make it public. The 12 officers split into 3 teams of 4. Harlem's afternoon. By 2 p.m., 125th Street was packed. Monday afternoon. Shopping. Errands. Conversations on stoops. The Red Rooster, Harlem's most famous soul food restaurant, had a line out the door. Bumpy arrived at 2:11 p.m. not for lunch, for a meeting with 3 local ministers about a youth program he was funding. He stepped out of the car, a black Lincoln Continental, wearing a gray suit, white shirt, thin black tie, 60 years old, 6'1", 180 pounds, face like carved stone. He'd taken maybe 3 steps toward the entrance when 4 patrol cars converged. Not pulled up. Converged, planned, coordinated. 12 officers emerged. The crowd, maybe 200 people, froze. Because everyone in Harlem knew what this was. Officer Donnelly approached first. 6'3", 240 pounds, nightstick already in hand. "Ellsworth Johnson, we need to have a conversation." Bumpy didn't move. Hands at his sides, face neutral. "About what?" Donnelly smirked, looked at the crowd, then back at Bumpy. "About you thinking you run this neighborhood." The other 11 officers formed a semicircle, cutting off sight lines, blocking exits. Officer Rossi moved to Bumpy's left, McIntyre to his right. Bumpy didn't turn his head, didn't acknowledge them. He kept his eyes on Donnelly. "I don't run anything, officer. I'm just here for lunch." Donnelly stepped closer. 3 feet away now. "See, that's the problem. You do think you run things, you think you're special." The crowd was silent, watching. Bumpy's driver, Tommy, started to move from the car. Bumpy raised one finger, barely a gesture. Tommy stopped. Donnelly saw it. That tiny display of control. It enraged him, because he was supposed to be in control. "You know what you are." Bumpy didn't respond. Donnelly leaned in, close enough that only Bumpy and the nearest officers could hear. And he said it, the word, loud enough for the first row of the crowd to hear, loud enough that it would spread. "You're just another N-word, Johnson, and it's time you remembered that." The crowd gasped. Someone dropped a bag of groceries. This wasn't just an insult. This was a gauntlet. In 1964 Harlem, with tensions already exploding, a white cop calling Bumpy Johnson that word in public wasn't just disrespect. It was an execution of reputation. If Bumpy reacted violently, he'd be arrested or shot, justified force. If he did nothing, his power evaporated. Can't protect yourself. Can't protect Harlem. Every man in that crowd knew it. Bumpy stood perfectly still for 11 seconds, not frozen, calculating. Then he smiled, not a friendly smile, something else. Officer Donnelly felt it first, that cold certainty that he'd made a mistake. Bumpy spoke. 6 words, calm. "Clear, call your captain right now here." Donnelly blinked. "What?" "You heard me. Call Captain Lynch. Tell him Bumpy Johnson is requesting his presence at 125th and Lenox." Immediately. The other officers looked at each other. This wasn't the script. Suspects don't ask for commanding officers. They beg, they panic, they resist. They don't issue invitations. "Officer Rossi, you think you can just summon?" Bumpy cut him off, still calm. "I'm not summoning anyone. I'm giving you all the chance to have witnesses for what comes next." Donnelly's hand tightened on his nightstick. "Are you threatening officers of the law?" Bumpy's smile widened, didn't reach his eyes. "I'm protecting you." What happened next didn't make sense to those 12 officers. Bumpy didn't run, didn't shout, didn't fight. He waited. Officer Donnelly, confused and angry, made the call. "Captain, we've got Johnson at 125th and Lenox. He's asking for you to come down here." Through the radio, faint but clear. "What?" "He specifically requested your presence, sir." Silence for 8 seconds. Then, "Hold him there, I'm coming." The officers formed a tighter circle around Bumpy. The crowd, now swelling to over 300 people, stayed back. But they didn't leave. Something was happening, something historic. Bumpy stood in the center, hands still at his sides. He glanced at the crowd, made eye contact with a few familiar faces, and he winked. Mrs. Della Washington, who'd known Bumpy since 1935, later said, "That wink told us he's got this. Just watch." For 11 minutes, nobody moved. Bumpy didn't speak. The officers didn't speak. The only sound was Harlem breathing. Lynch's arrival, 2:26 p.m. Captain Howard Lynch arrived in an unmarked sedan. He stepped out, saw the crowd, saw his 12 officers, saw Bumpy Johnson standing there like he was hosting this event. Lynch approached slowly, authority in every step. "Johnson, what's this about?" Bumpy didn't answer immediately. Let the silence stretch. Then, "Your officer used a word. In public, on my street." Lynch glanced at Donnelly, back to Bumpy. "What word?" "You know what word?" Lynch's jaw tightened. "My officers were doing their job." "No," Bumpy's voice dropped, colder. "Your officers were trying to provoke me. And they succeeded, just not the way you planned." Lynch stepped closer, trying to reclaim dominance. "You think you can," Bumpy interrupted, still calm, still smiling. "Captain Lynch, let me tell you what happens next. In approximately," Bumpy glanced at his watch, "4 minutes, a reporter from the Amsterdam News will arrive. His name is Marcus Williams. I called him at 2:13 p.m. Lynch's face changed. "In 6 minutes, a representative from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund will arrive. Her name is Patricia Dawson. I called her at 2:15 p.m. Donnelly's hand moved toward his nightstick. "In 9 minutes, Congressman Adam Clayton Powell Jr., S. Chief of Staff, will arrive. Because the congressman is very interested in police misconduct cases right now, especially in election years." Lynch's voice was strained. "You can't." "I already did." Bumpy took 1 step forward. The officers instinctively stepped back. "Here's what else happens. Every witness here, and there are over 300 now, will testify that Officer Donnelly used racial slurs, unprovoked, while I was attempting to enter a restaurant. The New York Times has been dying for a follow-up to the Gilligan shooting. This is perfect, systemic racism targeting community leaders. And here's the beautiful part." Bumpy's smile was arctic now. "I'm not going to sue the NYPD. I'm not going to file complaints. I'm not going to do anything." "Lynch, then what?" "You are." Silence. "You're going to suspend Officer Donnelly, pending investigation. You're going to issue a public apology to the Harlem community. And you're going to reassign every officer present today out of Harlem permanently." Lynch actually laughed, bitter, desperate. "Or what?" Bumpy's expression didn't change. "Or I make 3 more phone calls." Phone call 1. Deputy Commissioner Harold Ramirez. He's been very helpful over the years, mostly because I know about his arrangement with the policy banks in Queens. $1,200 monthly. Been going on since 1959. Lynch's face went pale. Phone call 2, Judge Leonard Horowitz, State Supreme Court. Good man, family man, loves his wife. Would hate for anyone to know about his apartment in the Village. The one he shares with his research assistant, David. Officers started glancing at each other. Phone call 3, this one's my favorite. Inspector General's office. I have documentation, receipts, ledgers, testimony, proving that the 28th Precinct has been systematically extorting Harlem businesses for protection money since 1961. Bumpy paused. "I have your signature on authorization forms, Captain." The crowd was dead silent. Lynch was frozen, his career flashing before his eyes. Bumpy continued, voice softer now, almost sympathetic. "I've had this information for 3 years. Never used it because I don't want war with the NYPD. I want coexistence. But you came to my street, used that word in front of my people. So now we establish new rules. At 2:31 p.m., Marcus Williams from the Amsterdam News arrived. At 2:33 p.m., Patricia Dawson from the NAACP arrived. At 2:38 p.m., Congressman Powell's chief of staff arrived. All three stood at the edge of the crowd, watching. Captain Lynch looked at his 12 officers. Back to Bumpy, he'd lost, and he knew it. "What do you want?" His voice was hollow. Bumpy's response was immediate. He'd had this prepared for years. "Effective immediately, Officer Donnelly is suspended without pay. 2-week minimum." Lynch nodded slowly. "These 12 officers are reassigned. Out of Harlem, I don't care where, just out." Lynch's mouth was a thin line, but he nodded again. "And you, Captain?" Bumpy stepped even closer. Inches away. Spoke quietly enough that only Lynch could hear. "You issue a formal written apology to the Harlem community for inappropriate conduct by your officers. It runs in the Amsterdam News this Friday." Lynch's jaw clenched. "They'll demote me. Maybe, or maybe you frame it as progressive community relations, your choice. But if you don't," Bumpy didn't finish. Didn't need to. Lynch stood there for 17 seconds. The crowd held its breath. Finally, Lynch turned to Officer Donnelly. "You're suspended. Turn in your badge and gun, effective immediately." Donnelly's face went red. "Captain, you can't." Now, stunned, Donnelly removed his badge, his gun, handed them over. Lynch addressed the other 11 officers without looking at them. "Report to headquarters tomorrow morning. Reassignment pending." Then Lynch turned to the crowd. His voice was robotic, humiliated. "The New York Police Department regrets any inappropriate conduct displayed today. We are committed to respectful community relations." It wasn't the full apology, but it was surrender. Lynch walked back to his car, got in, drove away. The 12 officers followed in their patrol cars, and Bumpy Johnson stood on 125th Street surrounded by 300 witnesses, untouched. The crowd erupted, not in violence, in celebration, applause, shouting, laughter, because they just witnessed something impossible. A black man made the NYPD back down, in public, without a shot fired. By 4:00 p.m., all of Harlem knew. By 6:00 p.m., the Amsterdam News had an emergency edition being printed. By 9:00 p.m., the NYPD commissioner's office was in crisis. Let me show you how the ripples spread. The 28th precinct. Captain Lynch returned to his precinct at 3:15 p.m., locked himself in his office, made one phone call to his union rep. By 5:00 p.m., Internal Affairs was involved, not investigating Donnelly, investigating Lynch, because word had leaked. Bumpy Johnson had leverage on high-ranking officials, and if it was true, if Lynch was involved in extortion, the entire precinct could be exposed. Lynch was given a choice: retire quietly or face full investigation. He retired 6 weeks later, moved to Florida, never spoke publicly about August 17th. Officer Patrick Donnelly never returned to the force. He was formally terminated September 3, 1964. No pension. The other 11 officers, scattered. 2 sent to Staten Island, 3 to Queens, 4 to the Bronx. 3 quit the force entirely within 6 months. None ever worked in Harlem again. Harlem's reaction. That night, the Red Rooster was packed beyond capacity. Bumpy finally got his lunch at 8:30 p.m., surrounded by community leaders, ministers, business owners. Reverend Thomas Jefferson stood and raised a glass. "To the man who proved we don't have to accept anything." The room roared, but Bumpy's response surprised them. He stood, quiet, waiting for silence. "Today wasn't about me," confused faces. "Today was about information, about knowing your enemy better than they know themselves. I didn't win because I'm stronger. I won because I was prepared." He looked around the room. "For 3 years I collected evidence, not to use it to have it. Insurance. Every interaction with Lynch's people I documented. Every shakedown, every planted evidence case, every lie. Patient. Quiet, because power isn't about who shouts loudest, it's about who knows more. That statement would be quoted for decades. The NYPD's internal crisis. August 19, 1964, NYPD headquarters. Commissioner Michael Murphy called an emergency meeting with precinct captains. Topic: the Harlem situation. Murphy was blunt. We have a problem. One man just embarrassed the entire department. Not with violence, with intelligence. He laid out the concern. If Bumpy Johnson actually had documentation of corruption, and the 28th Precinct incident suggested he did, then how many other officers could he expose? One captain asked, "Do we go after him? Harder?" Murphy's response was telling. "No, we leave him alone." Shocked silence. If we escalate, he escalates. And based on what happened Monday, his information is better than ours. We can't win a knowledge war. The new strategy, coexistence. Don't provoke Bumpy Johnson. Don't give him reasons to use his leverage. The NYPD, the most powerful police force in America, had just adopted a détente policy with one man. The political fallout, Congressman Adam Clayton Powell Jr., saw opportunity. August 21st, he gave a speech at Abyssinian Baptist Church. This week, we witnessed true power, not violence, not begging, strategic action. Bumpy Johnson showed us that knowledge, preparation, and courage can defeat any system of oppression. Powell didn't condone Bumpy's criminal activities, but he recognized the symbolism. A black man forced the system to respect him. The NAACP issued a carefully worded statement. While we do not endorse extralegal activities, the events of August 17th demonstrate the urgent need for police reform and accountability. Translation: they couldn't publicly support a known criminal, but privately, they were thrilled. The broader impact: within 3 months, NYPD complaints from Harlem residents increased 340%. Not because abuse increased, because people believed they could report it now. Bumpy had broken the spell. If he could make the NYPD back down, maybe they could too. Community oversight boards began forming. Lawyers started taking police brutality cases pro bono. The power dynamic was shifting, and it all traced back to 6 words on a street corner. September 1964. Esquire magazine sent a reporter to interview Bumpy. He rarely gave interviews, but this time he agreed. The reporter asked, "How did you know Lynch would back down?" Bumpy's response became legendary. "I didn't know. I gave him a choice. Every man has 2 things, his reputation and his fear. Lynch's reputation was authority, his fear was exposure. I made exposure more painful than surrender. That's not violence, that's architecture. You build the structure where the only rational move is the one you want." The reporter, "But what if he'd called your bluff?" Bumpy smiled. "It wasn't a bluff. I had the documents, the witnesses, the phone numbers. Never threaten what you can't deliver. That's the difference between power and pretending." The interview ran in October 1964. Malcolm X read it in his hotel room and reportedly said, "That man understands strategy better than most generals." Years later, in 1972, journalist Marcus Williams interviewed witnesses and participants for a book that was never published. He uncovered additional layers. 1. Bumpy had planned for this moment for 3 years. Starting in 1961, after recognizing Lynch's hostility, Bumpy systematically documented everything. Police shakedowns, 47 incidents recorded, planted evidence, 12 cases with witnesses, extortion payments, ledgers from 23 businesses. He'd hired a private investigator, a retired FBI agent, to gather dirt on Lynch and his command staff. Cost him $18,000 over 3 years, worth every penny. 2. The phone calls to the reporter, NAACP lawyer, and Powell's office were prearranged. All three were on standby. Bumpy had contacted them days earlier. "Be ready, I'm going to force a confrontation." They were waiting for his call. 3. The crowd wasn't random. Bumpy had spread word that morning. "I'll be at the Red Rooster at 2:00 p.m. Might be interesting." His network ensured a crowd would be present. Witnesses were part of the plan. 4. Lynch had no idea he was walking into a trap. He thought he was responding to a suspicious incident. Instead, he walked into a public trial with 300-person jury. This wasn't improvisation. This was orchestration. But here's what makes it genius. Even knowing it was planned, Lynch still had no good moves. Because everything Bumpy threatened was true. August 17, 1964 wasn't just about one confrontation. It was a blueprint. For the next 4 years, until his death in 1968, Bumpy Johnson operated with virtual immunity from NYPD harassment. Not because they feared his violence, because they feared his information. The lesson spread beyond Harlem. Civil rights lawyers started using Bumpy's strategy: document everything, build leverage, force negotiation. The Black Panthers, founded 1966, adopted similar intelligence-gathering tactics. Even Malcolm X, in his final speeches, emphasized, "Know your enemy's weaknesses better than your own." What can we learn from August 17, 1964? Principle 1. Preparation defeats power. Bumpy spent 3 years building leverage he hoped never to use. Most people react to threats. He anticipated them. Think about it. How much time do you spend preparing for conflicts you hope never happen? Bumpy's answer: years. In business, in relationships, in life. The person with better information wins. Not the loudest, not the strongest, the most prepared. Principle 2. Public accountability is power. Lynch thought he had all the power, guns, badges, authority. But Bumpy's greatest weapon was witnesses. 300 people, 3 reporters, 1 congressman's representative. He didn't fight Lynch privately. He made it public. Because systems of oppression depend on operating in shadows. Shine light on them and they fold. Principle 3. Strategic patience beats emotional reaction. When Donnelly called him that word, Bumpy didn't swing. He didn't shout, didn't argue, he smiled. Because emotional reactions give your enemy control. Strategic responses take it back. Bumpy waited 11 minutes for Lynch to arrive. 11 minutes of discipline. Most men can't wait 11 seconds before reacting. That discipline, that patience, is what separated Bumpy from every other player in Harlem. For decades, August 17, 1964 wasn't in textbooks. Why? Because it doesn't fit the narrative. Mainstream history wants black leaders to be either saints or victims. Martin Luther King, saintly nonviolence. Malcolm X, victimized martyr. But Bumpy Johnson, strategic operator who won against the system. That's dangerous. Because it suggests regular people can gather information, build leverage, and force powerful institutions to back down. That's a blueprint for revolution. So the story was buried, forgotten, relegated to street legend. Until now. Here's why this matters today. We live in the information age. Documentation is easier than ever. Phones record everything. Social media broadcasts instantly. Every interaction with power, police, corporations, governments can be documented. Leverage isn't about physical strength anymore. It's about proof. Bumpy Johnson understood this in 1964. Imagine what you could do with it today. Bumpy Johnson died July 7, 1968. Heart attack. Age 62. He was playing cards at the Red Rooster when it happened. His funeral drew over 1,000 people: ministers, mobsters, politicians, residents. Congressman Powell gave the eulogy. He was a complicated man, but he was our complicated man. And he taught us that respect isn't given, it's documented, it's prepared, it's earned. The NYPD sent no representatives, but privately, several retired officers admitted they respected him. Because Bumpy never pretended to be a hero. He was what he was, but when pushed, he didn't fold, he planned. And on August 17, 1964, that plan worked perfectly. 6 words: call your captain, right now. Here, not a threat, an invitation. An invitation to a trial Bumpy had already won. Because the trial wasn't in a courtroom, it was in preparation. 3 years of documentation, networks of witnesses, leverage on powerful people. Lynch never had a chance. The moment Donnelly said that word, Bumpy had already won. He just gave them the opportunity to realize it. That's power. Not violence, not luck, preparation. If this story moved you, hit subscribe. Because this is what this channel does. We uncover the hidden history they don't teach. Next video: the night Malcolm X and Bumpy Johnson met in a Harlem basement. What they planned changed everything. Drop a comment. What would you have done as Captain Lynch when Bumpy made his demands? Because power isn't about what you'd want to do. It's about what you're prepared to do. Bumpy Johnson understood that. Now you do too.